right, where in this book says Ocmulgee National Monument. This is from the United States Department of the Interior, Harold L. Ike, Secretary, National Park Service, 1941. It says on December 23rd, 1936, Ocmulgee National Monument was established by presidential proclamation and placed under the jurisdiction of the National Park Service. United States Department of the Interior. Development of the area started in 1933, though a series of archaeological investigations financed with federal emergency appropriations and supervised by experts of the Smithsonian Institution. The monument lies east of the city of Macon, in the heart of historic Georgia, and is bounded on the southwest by the Ocmulgee River, a winding muddy stream. The entrance is from a United States Highway 80, which leads from Macon to Seacoast City of Savannah. The Ocmulgee National Monument area is divided into two portions. The larger 638 acres lies on a series of bluffs, flat and extensive on top, and encircles the meandering course of the Ocmulgee River. Upon the tableland expanse of these bluffs are located the remains of several ancient Indian civilizations in the form of 7 prehistoric mounds, an elaborate fortification system, a ceremonial earth lodge, a cultivated field buried beneath a mound, an ancient trading post, and a few Indian burial mounds. South and east, following the winding course of the Ocmulgee, at a distance of 2.5 miles from Macon, lies another tract of about 40 acres known as the Lamar area, the development of which has not yet been completed. About 800 years ago, bands of Indians from the north or northeast invaded the pleasant, game-stocked country of central Georgia and settled in the area of the present monument after displacing an earlier population. These Indians, called Swift Creek, built no mounds on Ocmulgee, but in their old village they led distinctive tools and utensils. They were defeated by another strong tribe, the Mason Plateau Indians, who came from Tennessee and Kentucky. Around the year 1350, the Mason Plateau Indians built the huge mounds, the fortified village, the ceremonial earth lodges near the Ocmulgee River, and grew corn, squash, beans, and tobacco in the fertile fields. Unmolested for a time, they in turn were probably either absorbed or driven out by the Hichiti tribe, a branch of the powerful Creek Confederacy. The Creeks continued to live on the banks of the Ocmulgee until about 1720, trading and fighting with the ever-threatening white men. On the 40-acre tract south of the Ocmulgee site, there was another Indian civilization which followed upon the occupation of the Mason Plateau Indians. This culture is called Lamar. After the site name, the inhabitants built mounds and lived inside a stockade village that was similar in some ways to the village on Ocmulgee itself. Even though the settlement tended to disappear with the westward movement of the white man, the significance of the remains has long been appreciated. William Bartram, English scientist and explorer, wrote about them in 1793, and since that time references to these mounds and villages frequently have been made. But even though the area was known as Indian Mounds, the visitors did not envisage the extensive civilization that lay buried in the fields. The significance of Ocmulgee. The area is significant archaeologically for several reasons. It represents an extreme concentration in a relatively small area of archaeological remains that have yielded considerable information concerning the almost unknown early history of the southern United States. Ocmulgee represents a zone or location where many important prehistoric and historic cultures overlap. Recorded on this area are presumably continuous Indian occupation, representing 4 major cultural influences: the Swift Creek, the Mason Plateau, the Lamar, and the historic Creek Indians. And the spectacular exhibits at Ocmulgee, the mounds, buildings, tools, utensils, and bones, the visitor can appreciate the significance of the civilizations that preceded and existed at the time of the coming of the white man, so-called white man. So in this book, they have this pretty awesome picture, I think, especially to all the mud flood researchers out there. I just want to read what it says here. It says, this vertical cut or profile was made through the east shoulder slope of the burial mound. The mound is a mosaic structure, really 5 mounds in one. each new layer built on a preceding layer. Note the striking banding of colorful clay streamers superimposed over sand fill, dumped in place during construction. In the foreground, two burial pits originally cut through the clay slopes of an earlier stage of mound building can be seen. All right, so I want to basically show you there's like stairs. All this was buried. Look how this looks like a building. There's actually stairs here. I actually colorized this. I'm going to show you guys. There's an entrance right here. I guess they're trying to say that this was underneath only because they were building it. But what if this was really buried during a mud flood or something like that, right? And this is the picture colorized, all right? Look how it looks like a temple now. All right, you see the entrance, see the stairs, all right, over here. This was buried supposedly. This was a mound they destroyed. See the digging of the mound? This was what inside the mound. Amazing, right? And let me show you another angle. All right, this is from another book that I'm going to read from. And just look at the stairs. This is inside the mound. This was inside. I'm going to show you some other pictures of the area here, colorized. So this was what they were finding when they were digging up. You see how many layers and feet. And you see these are all like trenches, they were saying. I was reading trenches. You know, they're saying probably for war and all that, like little trenches, right? And then this is the trading post they call. But they're trying to say the Europeans built this, but who's to say the Indians didn't have this already? And then when they say the dates, they say probably built in 1670 to 17, you know, they don't even know. All right, so dodge the hijack. And some more pictures here of the trenches, as you guys can see. Dug deep, right? This is what they found underneath, all right, here near the mounds. And also a lot of tombs, a lot of burial mounds. They found a lot of human remains, skeletons with a bunch of beads, you know, jewelry, copper bells on them, buried with them. So things like that. All right, so I just thought it was interesting. You know, I don't know. You tell me. Look at this. What's this doing inside the mound? You know.
Ocmulgee National Monument was authorized back in 1934, basically to preserve these prehistoric mounds. That's all they thought was here when the park was first authorized. Back in the 1930s, before the park was even established, while the locals were still working with the legislature trying to get this park authorized and established, the locals also realized that this might be an ideal location for a New Deal works project. And so once again, working with the legislature, they managed to get this designated as a WPA work site. And working with the Smithsonian, they actually sent down two Smithsonian archaeologists, and those two men ended up overseeing a workforce of 800 men. So pretty difficult for two archaeologists to oversee that large of a workforce. But they basically ran trenches at various locations on this site, did some trenches on top of the Great Temple Mound, Left Temple Mound, and they found here that huge continuum. We ended up with over 2.5 million items that this dig found in this location. We discovered it had a time period that goes back to the Ice Age mammoth hunters. And this site was then used ever since that first arrival of humans here in the Southeast. So it's Ocmulgee National Monument, referred to locally as the Indian Mounds, but the park is so much more than mounds. It is, once again, the whole prehistory of the Southeast. The mounds were built by a group that the archaeologists call the Mississippian people. Mississippian culture is a very widespread culture. Its actually hub is near St. Louis at a place called Cahokia. And that philosophy, that mound building religion or whatever it was, spread throughout the eastern half of the United States. Ocmulgee is kind of considered the hub of the Mississippian culture here in the Southeast. kind of like, I guess maybe a sub-capital to the main capital there at Cahokia. And this society, the Mississippians, existed on this site for over 300 years. Now, after that period of time, for some reason they left this site. We have no idea why, what happened, if it was change in climate, change in religious beliefs, or or what. Maybe it might have been warfare, who knows. But this site was abandoned, and then about 100 years later, the Park Service has a site just about a mile and a half south of here along the Ocmulgee River called Lamar. A little different culture, still a mound building culture. The Lamar culture then is the one who DeSoto came in contact with in 1540. Then unfortunately, with the arrival of DeSoto, that greatly affected the prehistoric peoples. Some archaeologists I've heard talk about as much as 70 to 80% loss of life. After that great loss of life, that according to the Muskogee Creek oral tradition, is the remnants of those various groups that were touched by DeSoto came together here at Ocmulgee and sat down together and created a new confederacy of tribes. And they're going to call themselves Muskogee. And that's who now later on the Europeans called the Creeks. And so now they call themselves the Muskogee Creek people. So this area, once again, not only has the huge prehistoric history, but sacred to the historic tribes and has a very long historical period also. This site has 7 mounds on it. The one in back of me we refer to as the Great Temple Mound. It's the largest mound we have. It's 55 feet high on the front side. That is where we believe the chief of the society, the tribe, lived. Archaeologists did find evidence of 3 structures up on top of there. And so that's where we believe there was a ramp that went up the front of it. And we believe that the chief basically ran the society from on top of there. And then just down from that, you'll see a smaller mound. That's called the Lesser Temple Mound. There was a structure up on top of that also. And unfortunately, we're not really sure how big that mound was. The railroad in the 1830s came through and took off the entire side of that mound. Now, height-wise, it may be close to original height, but as far as width, we have no idea because the railroad took off a whole side of it, and of course, they didn't care to photograph it or mention it, so we have no idea how much they removed. Also up here, just away from the Great Temple Mound, another one of our famous mounds is what we refer to as the Funeral Mound. The Funeral Mound is here. It was placed for the burial, but only apparently of the high-ranking people. The number of burials that were found in the Funeral Mound definitely would not account for all the deaths in this size of a society. So it was very evident also with some of the artifacts that were found with the burials that the funeral mound was reserved for certain high-ranking individuals. Where the other people were buried, we're not really sure. We're always very careful about any ground disturbing we do here, and I work with the tribes on that because we never know when there might be a chance that we might, while digging a post hole for a sign, might hit a burial. So we are very conscious of that because somewhere around here there probably are literally thousands of burials. We are standing on the top of what we call the Great Temple Mound. We believe this is where the chief lived. There were 3 structures in evidence up here, and we're guessing it's probably a limited, only certain folks were allowed to come up on top of this mound for meetings with the chief or various religious meetings or activities. So not everybody was probably allowed to come up here. So this society probably covered 20 or more miles up and down the river. So they would have controlled a very large area. The main reason we feel this area has been used for the millennia that it has been is because it is right, it's evidence of 2 ecological areas combined. This is the edge was called the fall line, which is the area between the coastal plain and the Piedmont Plateau. In fact, this mound is literally on the edge of the fall line. The Piedmont Plateau drops off at the base of this mound, and from here on out becomes the coastal plain. So with these two meeting areas, you have both the plants and the animals from those ecosystems both here. So you had a great variety of animals to choose from, plants to eat from, and of course the river was right there with all of its foodstuffs and transportation. So you really had the ideal place for these people to be over all these thousands of years because of that meeting of the two ecosystems right in this location. We are inside our Earth Lodge, and we're looking at is the original 1,000-year-old Earth Lodge floor. This is a very interesting structure. There are 50 seats in this room. From the entrance to the door, it comes around in the circle. Each seat is slightly higher and wider than the preceding seat, and 47 seats come up, and then on this bird-shaped effigy are the three main seats. The measurements they use to build this are extremely accurate. It is within a few inches of being a perfect circle. It's the four pillars that held up the ceiling are also within a few inches of being a perfect square. The fire pit is directly in the exact center of the structure. So they indeed did have ways of making some very, very accurate measurements in building these structures. The only archaeological items that were found was a conch shell, which we assume was used for scooping, and then a pot. So what else initially may have been in here? Who knows? It ended up being burned. We have no idea if it was a ceremonial cleansing or a closing, or if indeed may have been an accident. The fire got away, but ended up fire was in here. The ceiling and everything collapsed, and then that ended up preserving the floor. I guess the roof and soil and so forth came down and preserved the site as we see it. We think it's very important to interpret this story to the visitors so that they can not only understand this great prehistory, and that indeed, well before, decades or millennia before the arrival of Columbus and the Europeans, they had very well-established, very successful societies here on the North American continent. It was not an empty place. And so it's important to show people that these were very organized societies of artists, craftspeople, leaders, organized societies.
This book is the Mason Guide and Ocmulgee National Monument, compiled by the workers of the Writers Program of the Work Projects Administration in the state of Georgia, sponsored by Mason Junior Chamber of Commerce, 1939. Page 64 of this book says here, Ocmulgee National Monument, says the Indian mounds at Old Ocmulgee Fields on the Mason Plateau east of the city, and at Lamar Fields 2.5 miles down the Ocmulgee River, comprise of the Ocmulgee National Monument, one of the most important archaeological sites in North America. On this tract of more than 600 acres, excavation and restoration, financed by federal funds, have been carried on since 1933 under the direction of the Smithsonian Institution. So great a wealth of material has been unearthed that the task of organizing and classifying the evidence is far from finished. All right, so they're just getting to these places in the 1930s and 40s and trying to, supposedly restore them, right? After all the sacking and everything they did, reclassifying, stealing of artifacts and putting them in museums and saying they came from somewhere else in Africa. I'm just saying. But yeah, this was an important place, as you can see. So that's the hijack. Workers under the direction of Dr. A.R. Kelly, representatives of the Smithsonian Institution, have found burials, houses, hundreds of skeletons, and thousands of artifacts such as potsherds, pottery, weapons, tools, pipes, ornaments, which date from the historic period far back into the indefinite past. Excavation has brought to light the arts and customs of the people who build their houses and mounds, fashioned their pottery, and hunted, fished, and even farmed long before Columbus sailed for this continent. It is known that for uncounted hundreds of years, Indians lived on the Mason Plateau and along the entire Ocmulgee Basin, but not in an unbroken sequence, for different tribes and nations migrated to replace each other, so that the evidences are often overlapping and confused. The meaning of much of the material still undecided, but it is certain that many of the discoveries have unusual archaeological value. All right, so one of the key things they keep emphasizing is how different kind of peoples and nations occupy this place, this one location right here, throughout the last thousands of years. It says here, archaeology of the funeral mound, Ocmulgee National Monument, Georgia. National Park Service, U.S. Department of the Interior. All right, look at this drawing right here. By Charles H. Fairbanks with introduction by Frank M. Setzler, 1956. It says here, historical accounts. The first recorded mention of the mounds at Ocmulgee is in the account by one of General James E. Oglethorpe's rangers of the expedition by the general to the lower creeks in 1739. The ranger says, we camped at Ocmulgee River, where there are 3 mounds raised by the Indians over 3 of their great kings who were killed in the wars. All right, so just like the Egyptian pharaohs getting buried, right, in these mounds, on these temples, pyramids. The next recorded mention of Ocmulgee Oldfields is by James Adair, and discussing the southern Indians believe in ghosts and spirits. He says Indians and traders claim to have heard ghostly singings and dancing, and especially at Ocmulgee, the old waste town belonging to the Muskogee, 150 miles southwest of Augusta in Georgia, which the South Carolinians destroyed about the year 1715. This, of course, refers to the old fields at Ocmulgee that were the remains of the Creek settlement around the Carolinian trading post. It does, however, suggest more extensive remains than those of the trading post and reveals the feeling of awe in which these remains were regarded by Indian and frontiermen. Before I left this book, I just wanted to show you guys what it says here about. So they're trying to describe different things of the area here, the site. Physical type is the category here, the subject, and look what it says. It says, not a single measurable skull can be identified in the collections as belonging to the Mason Plateau period at the funeral mound. He's literally saying they can't find the skulls. Where are they? This is unfortunate, as field photographs indicate many burials have been in at least fair shape. He's saying that's very, very unfortunate, because we can see in the photographs that they had when they first came here that they found a lot of these bones. Therefore, at present, nothing can be said about the physical type. You see what they're saying? Because what they're going to find here, they're going to find, what they're going to find here, you already know what they're going to find here. All right? Copper-colored tribes of America. They just don't want you to tell you. So what they do with all these bones, huh? What they do with all, and who were these people buried? Huh? What did they do with them? Did they put them in museums in Europe and say they were coming from Egypt? I wonder. All right, and then it keeps going about nothing really. But I thought this was interesting. I want you guys to see how they literally just told you, nope, well, we can't tell you nothing about the physical type of who was there, who's the people there, because we got no bones, even though there's so many photographs showing bones. And again, I showed you guys already one and colorized like this one. All right, this is one. All right, these are some more right here, as you guys can see. So where did all these bones go? All right, look at this: burial, bundled burial, bundled burial, burial, a typical historic flex burial intrusive in the funeral mound. Funeral mound, it's literally a funeral mound, yet they have no bones, right? Is it because they're gonna probably indicate a so-called Negroid, a type, as they call it, or reference it? You gotta dodge the hijack. American type, paleo Indian type, right?
Atlanta, Georgia, one of the largest cities in the American South and capital of the state of Georgia. Yet Atlanta was not the first great city to exist in Georgia, and its structures were not the first to rise above the dense southeastern forest. For over 4,000 years, the original Native American inhabitants of Georgia constructed some of the most impressive monuments in all of North America. Hidden in the dense southern forests, these forgotten ancient cities are only now beginning to give up their secrets. And what they're revealing are civilizations more complex and advanced than was ever imagined possible. Located an hour south of Atlanta, the Ocmulgee Mounds complex represents the arrival of a new people in Georgia. Archaeologists call these new arrivals the Mississippians. Originating possibly in Mexico, these new people would bring a level of political sophistication and artistic achievement to Georgia that had not yet been seen.
Well, we have 7 mounds here. And oftentimes the mounds are used for different things. The Great Temple Mound, the Lesser Temple Mound, these are social gathering places. Places that people got together for all the many reasons we gather in places where we don't actually live. Getting together for religion and ceremony to celebrate life. Getting together for the harvest. Getting together to watch the sky as it changes at night. Traders, getting up on top of this mound, could light a fire and let everyone down below know they were there. And religious leaders and political leaders could exemplify their power and their strength and their importance by living near or on these places. This site was a massive site, 1,500 to 2,000 people. There was a courtyard area between the greater and lesser mound. But much of what was here, we can't tell if there was a ball court area. There was certainly a gathering plaza between those two mounds. But since this area was used as a farm in the 17 and 1800s, much of the data is gone, destroyed by the plows and the cows of the dairy farm that were here. These mounds, back when they were used, would have had steps. On the Great Temple Mound, actually 2 layers of steps going up this side that's looking at us. They would have been covered with colored clays and kept free of vegetation. These mounds are phenomenal. The Great Temple Mound had buildings on top of it, a great place for people to gather. And it went up in stages, and we don't find much inside. The Earth Lodge is probably the most spectacular thing we have here at Ocmulgee National Monument. The Earth Lodge is a social idea, and it was a spectacular development of society and culture here. A circle of seats. And this was not the only one. There were 3 others here, which infers the need for social places like this. This was the largest one. A circle of 50 seats with a bird effigy built inside. It was a functional building, covered with dirt. It kept it cool. A hole in the center. The structure would not have raised up like a mound shape. It would have been flat-topped with a hole for the smoke to get out. In this structure, problems were solved, societies were planned, spirituality was celebrated, and the circle of life went round and round. It resembles much of what we do today, and shows us a little bit that society in ancient times had many similarities rather than the differences we so often see.
Yet Ocmulgee was doomed to failure. Within 200 years, the great city had been abandoned. Perhaps these newcomers had worn out their welcome, and their city had become too difficult to defend. In fact, these newcomers would go on to build an even greater city just north of Atlanta. They would call this new city Etowah.